Well, this is amazing. It's great to see so many people. I figured a few people might come. Father Alex and I, we actually took a wager to see, to guess how many people would come to Mass when there was no power. I won. He guessed that there would be 12 people. So I think there's a few more. There's several hundred, which is amazing. So give yourselves a round of applause for coming out. I was going to say the church doesn't have power, but that's not true. The church doesn't have electricity. But the power of God is here today. So I just got back from Ireland, and it was an amazing trip, a privilege to be there for Father Ronan's ordination to the priesthood. Many of you would know he was here from January to June of this year doing an internship, and it was awesome. I had all kinds of pictures ready to show you from the trip and of his ordination, etc. But simply to say this, Father Ronan, his family, and the Bishop Finton, they were all so touched by this little delegation of Canadians who went over for the ordination and representing symbolically so many hundreds of others who were united in prayer for his ordination. And so thank you for that. And he's promised to come at some point to visit us and celebrate a massive Thanksgiving. So we look forward to that day. We're continuing and concluding, in fact, a preaching series called Come to Life. Because we want our parish, as we begin a new ministry year, to come to life, as individuals come to life in Jesus. And two weeks ago, I was preaching about the prodigal son story and how God has this pazzo d'amore, this crazy love for each one of us. And then last week, Father Alex, he was preaching about sheep, our seminarian Sebastian, his little sheep impersonation, and how God, Jesus, is the one mediator between God and humanity. And so naturally this week, I'm going to be preaching about the age of authenticity. And you're like, what? I'll explain. When I was a kid, I grew up taking piano lessons. Many of you know my mom is a piano teacher, and she's a very gifted musician. And so right in my own living room, I had free piano lessons. And I remember I'd be practicing, and this would commonly happen. I'd be practicing away in the living room, probably 30 or 40 feet away in the kitchen. Mom was preparing a meal, and I'd make a mistake, and she'd say, "That was an F sharp, Simon." So I had free lessons, I had real-time coaching, and I probably had some kind of genetic musical advantage. And so I had everything going for me to become the next Johann Sebastian or Oscar Peterson. And yet, I stand before you. I can barely play a scale today. You know, I'm this washed-up musician, a has-been who never was. What was missing, right? I had the nature, I even had the environment, the nurture. What I lacked was the personal desire, the personal choice where I had said, yes, I want to be a great pianist. And so at the mature age of 12 or 13, I said, you know what, I have to be true to myself. And so I decided to quit piano and pursue other things. Now, this attitude, this notion is what has been dubbed the age of authenticity. It's something, a time in which we live, whether you like it or not, whether good or bad, this age of authenticity, meaning one of the highest values of all is that we would be authentic to our true selves. We would not just conform to social norms, expectations from the past, pressures from externals, but that we would be honest with ourselves, be people of integrity, choosing to align our inner beliefs with our words and our actions. And we see the conflict that forms when that is violated. Right? Maybe it was you were forced to take piano lessons. Maybe perhaps you were tall for your age, and your parents were like, I'm going to get you into basketball or volleyball, and you just wanted to pursue fine arts. I know many people, they were kind of pushed or even pressured towards a particular career path, and yet their heart was never in it. They weren't being true to themselves. I just got back from Ireland. I don't know if I mentioned that. And while I was there, I remember one night we had driven a long way. We got to the hotel, and it was late, and I was just looking forward to hitting the sack. And I was being checked in at reception, and the guy there, he said, "Now, Father, you'll have to come around for a drink." And, it's Ireland, right? And so he said it 3 or 4 times, so I didn't think I had an option. And so basically they built this hotel over top of a pub. And went around back. There was a small little group. And before I knew what was happening, they had poured a pint of Guinness for me. And so, you're trying to be a gracious guest. And I was about halfway through that Guinness before a second Guinness appeared. And so at that point, I was like, you know what? I have to be true to myself. I'm exhausted. I need some sleep. And so I politely declined the second one and retired for the evening. I'd never make a good Irishman. I know that. But maybe, similarly, you've been in situations where you felt pressure to do something and you're like, I know that I shouldn't do this. It's not good for me. We have to be true to ourselves. That's what this age of authenticity is about. And yet when I think about faith, there's this tension that exists between this age in which we live and the demands of our faith. Just think of one example. So infant baptism, right? Which is such a gift that we not delay to bring a child from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light, to be cleansed of original sin, to become part of God's family. And yet, a child has no say in the matter. Maybe most of you were baptized when you were younger. I certainly was. And what happens is there's this set of expectations, externals, that are related to baptism in the church. And I know of many people who grew up, they felt forced to go to church or to pray or to practice religion in some way, and that had a negative consequence. And so the only way I think infant baptism can make sense is if at a certain point later in life, there's this opportunity for an individual, maybe as an adult, to say, yes, I choose to ratify this choice that my parents made for me. I choose this for myself. I choose Jesus. And then it can go from this external that's imposed to something internal that is freely and authentically lived. Now we hear about this actually in our second reading today, where Paul is talking to Timothy, and he's urging this kind of personal and authentic response to faith. These two guys, they had a beautiful relationship. Timothy was much younger. Paul, on one of his missionary journeys, met this young man. He discipled him, raised him up in faith, and later they did some mission work together. And Paul's writing a letter of encouragement to Timothy, and he says this. He says, "Fight the good fight of faith." Literally, fight the beautiful fight of faith. What's being said is not just to enter into some kind of violent quarrel, but you've got to engage with everything you've got in this faith. You've got to go for it and choose, to use this language of this age of authenticity, I must choose this for myself. And he goes on to say this. Take hold of the eternal life to which you are called and for which you made the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. Take hold, grip it, this faith, grasp it ever more firmly, actively choose this. And there's this word confession. We might confuse it with the sacrament of confession, but actually a better word might be profession, a public declaration. I think what's being referred to is Timothy's baptism, where not as an infant, but as an adult, he expressed something. He said, yes, I choose this. I believe this. And this is something we actually, every Sunday we do. We publicly profess our faith when we recite the creed. But Paul's saying, don't just recite a bunch of words. From the depth of your heart, choose this. Now, how does this apply to us? I think ultimately what Paul is saying, don't just live somebody else's faith. Take hold of eternal life yourself. Choose it for yourself. And I think, it's so interesting. I was just in Ireland. Did I mention that? I was just in Ireland, and it was a wonderful experience. I'm probably not allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. It's not that different from here. I mean, beautiful terrain like we have. Wonderful, warm, hospitable people like we have. People who enjoy fun and food and drink and music like we do. And a whole heritage and a history of Christian Catholic faith, as we have here in Nova Scotia as well. And what I found is that, as is the case in Ireland and in Nova Scotia and pretty much everywhere in the Western world where there has been this history of Christianity, is there's a great danger, because the external or the past heritage, whatever those imposed expectations might have been, that's not enough to continue forward into the future. I remember being at Father Ronan's reception after the ordination, and his sister got up to give a speech, which was hilarious. She was talking about how he has relatively poor driving skills, which, had I known that, we would have never let him drive on the other side of the road here in Canada. I should have interviewed his sister before he came, actually, I realized. And then she said this, and it was totally in jest. She said, you know what, the best part about Ronan becoming a priest is that all the rest of us get a free pass to heaven. And everybody laughed, and I did too. And I remember my own ordination, one of my relatives saying something very similar. And then I thought, don't just live somebody else's faith. Like, that's inauthentic. But actually, to come to a place of choosing it for ourselves. And that night, I had a great chance to actually chat with Ronan's sister and her boyfriend, and we had a beautiful conversation. And by the end of it, I actually said, you know what? You might consider checking out an Alpha course near you. And they were really open, to be honest with you. And I want to offer that same invitation to you. We are running Alpha. It's starting this Wednesday, September 28th, 7 p.m. It's going to be on Wednesdays. And it's this chance, this space to come together. There'll be some food, a talk, and a conversation. And it's this space to explore faith that may have started historically, something that we inherited, something we received externally, and yet a place where we can actually enter into it authentically. To wrestle with ideas, to talk to people, to listen, to process, to ask questions, to have doubts. All of it is part of how we go from something being external to us to being personal and real and authentic. And if you haven't had the chance to experience this yet, I want to invite you to join us this fall. It's going to be amazing, and so many people experience this in a real way. They go from this external faith to something personal and authentic. Why do we do this? because we want to be a parish that's full of life, where people can come to life. We're so grateful for the heritage that we've received, the Christian heritage whether from Ireland or Nova Scotia, my own family from India, or wherever our families are from. We're so grateful for that. And yes, we want to be a church that looks to the future, where people can come and experience faith in a new way, where this church would be explosively alive. Why? Because if individuals have come to life, they've experienced Jesus in a real way. They've discovered him as not just something that's been passed on to them from somebody else, but someone who they know personally. Somebody who has changed their life. Nobody being forced or cajoled, but that people would freely and joyfully come to experience Jesus. And if our parish becomes alive and authentic, I think what's going to happen is people will walk in here, they're going to see that authenticity. And it's going to be attractive for them. They're going to be drawn in and say, yes, I've been looking for this. I want to be part of that.